My name is Sergeant First Class Talia Brooks, and the first time I laid eyes on the Riftlands, I thought someone had shattered the earth with a god's hammer and forgot to clean up. The terrain looked wrong like a memory that doesn't quite belong to you. Jagged spires of black crystal jutted into the air, leaning at angles no architect would dare. Every few seconds, a low hum pulsed through the ground. Not in our ears, in our bones. Place gives me the willies, Specialist Javier Mendez muttered behind me, adjusting the ammo belt slung over his chest. He was my assistant gunner, sharp for his age, and carried extra weight like it didn't bother him. Everything gives you the willies, I replied, eyeing the landscape through iron sights. My optics had fried the second we crossed the Riftlands perimeter, just like everyone else's gear. Radios, GPS, even the medkits with their biomonitors, dead weight now. We were back to old-school maps and our instincts. That's when Colonel Petra Sandoval, our commander, raised her fist, the signal to freeze. Then hell arrived. Gunfire exploded from 3 elevated positions. The crystals lit up with muzzle flashes, casting warped shadows in all directions. We were boxed in. Kill zone geometry, tight angles, overlapping fire. Someone had studied us, waited for the exact moment we stepped into their jaws. The colonel dropped in the first volley. Hit hard, center mass. She crumpled 30 meters ahead, out in the open. I saw it all. Heard someone yell, "Commander down," but I was already moving. Regulations say you don't cross open kill zones to retrieve a wounded officer. Field manuals say prioritize survival. Every survival instinct I had said I wouldn't make it. But I didn't stop. I didn't think. I charged straight into that firestorm, my M249 light machine gun thundering like righteous fury. I laid down suppressive bursts so loud and fast it felt like I could tear a path through the air itself. That moment, that was the start of a classified firefight that would be buried under top clearance red tape and ghost records. But the truth leaks, especially when a 31-year-old from Baton Rouge runs into hell and refuses to come out without her commander. And the story starts 96 hours earlier, in a bunker so deep underground, we couldn't hear our own cell signals die. No insignias, no agency markings, just a concrete box, humming fluorescent lights, and a holographic map floating in the air like a wound in space. The man leading the briefing called himself Director Quinn. No rank, no affiliation. But the way everyone in that room stood when he entered, that was all the authority he needed. He pointed to the hologram. "The Riftlands," he said, his voice calm like he was reading weather patterns and not explaining why the ground bends light in there. Roughly 38 square miles of geomagnetic chaos at the crossroads of 3 former war zones, he continued. Formed after an anomalous seismic event 22 years ago. No nation claims it. None want it. Until now. Colonel Sandoval, sitting straight-backed with her arms crossed, didn't blink. "Strategic value?" she asked. "Unclear," said Quinn. "Until recently." He tapped the map, and distorted satellite images fluttered to life. Blurs. Glitches. Heat blooms where no living things should be. 3 weeks ago, we picked up activity. Structures. Heat signatures. Movement. How? I asked from the back. If tech dies inside, how'd you spot anything? Brief windows, Quinn replied. Atmospheric anomalies let partial passes through. We stitched together enough data to find this. He zoomed in. A facility. Carved into crystal and stone. No flags. No guards. No explanation. Could have been a research lab. Could have been a prison. Could have been a trap. They were sending us in anyway. We had 72 hours to prepare. Colonel Sandoval made the rounds herself. Checked on gear. Inspected every weapon. Walked through the mission with the kind of patience that comes from years leading teams that never had the luxury of failure. She stopped by while I was stripping down my M249 for a final check. The weapon had been with me since Fallujah. Belt fed, heavy, loud. It made sense in my hands. Other people trusted rifles. I trusted thunder. "You're Talia Brooks," she said, not asking. 3 deployments. Kandahar, Mosul, then that thing outside Herer. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You held off a whole insurgent detachment while your convoy evac'd. Got a silver star for that. You believe in awards, Brooks?" I snapped the feed tray shut with a clean metallic click. "No, ma'am. I believe in bringing your people home." She smiled faintly, then tapped the map again. "This mission?" We walk in. 5 clicks to the target. No drones, no comms, no overwatch, no air support. Whatever happens in there, we deal with it ourselves. You ready for that? I grew up in South Baton Rouge, I said. Sometimes all you have is yourself and the people beside you. This is just a fancier version of that. The team was small. 8 of us total. Colonel Petra Sandoval, mission commander. Khalid Yusuf, intel and logistics. A calm Brit with a memory like a server rack. Javier Mendez, my assistant gunner. Wiry, funny, and unreasonably fast under pressure. Maggie Tran, medic. Tiny, tough, and stubborn enough to sew wounds mid-shootout. Roland Bishop, our demolitions expert. Once an oil rig worker, now a maestro of controlled chaos. Then the twins, Rico and Ren Ibarra, terrain specialists. Moved like their thoughts were synced. Never broke formation. Never needed to finish each other's sentences. And me, Talia, trigger puller, belt feeder. Wall when things went bad. We staged out of a remote NATO forward post buried in the Taurus Mountains. No civilians, no cameras, no questions. Just wind that howled like ghosts and skies so clear the stars looked close enough to touch. The insertion was by stealth rotor, midnight sharp. We dropped into a ravine right at the Riftlands edge. And the moment my boots hit the ground, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't altitude. It wasn't nerves. It was the air, too still, too thick. And the silence? Wrong. Not peaceful. Waiting. Colonel's voice came over local line. Check your gear. And that's when it began. Night vision. Dead. Radios. Static. Optics. Blank. Even our compasses spun slow, like they were getting dizzy just being there. We were in the dark, and not the kind you can light with a flashlight. This was the kind of dark that leaned in close, listened to your heartbeat, and waited for it to stop. The Riftlands didn't feel like terrain. It felt like something alive, waiting to see if we'd break. Every few meters, the ground shifted underfoot, never enough to drop us, just enough to keep us guessing. Rocks crunched the wrong way. Crystals hummed faintly, vibrating against the metal in our gear. And the light, don't get me started on the light. It bent around corners it had no business reaching. It flickered like a memory, trying to erase itself. 2 hours in, Rico Ibarra muttered, "We're walking downhill, right?" "No," his sister Rin said flatly. "We're climbing." Javier Mendez checked his paper map. "Both wrong. We're level." They all looked at me. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Then we found the body. Lying face up, gear stripped, boots still laced tight like he hadn't even had time to fight. A black crystal spike had driven clean through his chest. The wound looked wrong. Not just fatal, unnatural. Like the land had eaten him from the inside. Maggie knelt beside the corpse, checking for ID. 3 days, she murmured. At most. "No insignia," said Yusuf. "Could be one of the previous recon teams. Could be someone else." The colonel crouched and pointed at the crystal impaling him. "This wasn't here yesterday." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because it's still growing," she said. And she was right. We watched, stunned, as the edges of the spike moved. Inch by inch. Too slow to see unless you stared. But it was growing. Like a vine. Like it was feeding. Ren muttered, "We're walking through a minefield that builds itself." No one disagreed. By hour 4, we had eyes on the facility. Or what passed for one. It was embedded directly into a cliff, metal and concrete twisted into natural stone. Like someone had built it with the terrain, not against it. No movement. No guards. Just a massive steel blast door and a few vents spitting heat into the air. "Intel checks out," said Yusuf. "This is it." "Too quiet," Bishop muttered. "This far in, with no patrols." "The ground probably kills for them," Mendez offered. "Or they're watching us," I said, leveling my saw at the blast door. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs above, crisscrossed kill zones, planned ambush. Muzzle flashes danced like lightning in the shadows. We dove for cover behind jagged crystal outcrops, shards slicing skin and shredding uniforms. "Contact high," Rico shouted. "Multiple nests." I laid down bursts, tracers lighting up the haze. Mendez fed the belt like clockwork. 2 o'clock. "Up high," he yelled. I shifted, suppressed, reloaded. The M249 roared. My knuckles were white from recoil. 30 seconds later, it was over. Silence returned, thick and eerie. "Maggie," the colonel shouted. "Ibarra's hit," she called back. Ren's shoulder, Clean pass. She's stable. Probe team, I said, breath ragged. Testing our response. Sandoval nodded. And confirming we're here. Bishop ran up to the blast door and laughed. No keypads. Just old steel and tumblers. No subtlety left, muttered Yusuf. Bishop set a charge anyway. Time to knock. The explosion wasn't elegant, but it didn't need to be. The blast door buckled inward with a screech of warped steel. Dust rolled through the ravine, shimmering as it passed the crystals. Then silence, heavy and waiting. Colonel Sandoval held up her hand. Weapons ready. Stacked tight. We moved like muscle memory, clearing corners, checking sight lines, overlapping coverage. The facility's interior wasn't what I expected. Not a prison, not a war lab. It was clean, impossibly so. White corridors lined with flickering LEDs. Polished floors unmarred by dirt. Air cold, but breathable. No bodies, no alarms, no signs of a firefight. But it felt off, like everything was half a second behind us. Like we were being watched by a room that hadn't caught up yet. No splitting up, Sandoval ordered. Yusuf, you're on Nav Brooks, front arc with me. We pushed deeper. Offices stripped in a rush. Mugs still full. Terminals flashing login screens. Whoever was here, said Maggie, left in a hurry. Or they knew we were coming. I muttered, my finger resting on the trigger housing. We entered what looked like a lab, a central console surrounded by glass enclosures. Strange crystal samples pulsed faintly in containment cylinders. But one was shattered, an empty stand, faint scorch marks on the floor around it. What was in there? Mendez asked. Yusuf didn't answer. He was already flipping through folders scattered across a workstation. Notes in 3 languages, he said, and none of them match each other. This isn't just multinational. It's a coalition gone rogue. Black site, Sandoval confirmed. Joint operations off the books. Then the ground moaned beneath us. Not shook, not rumbled. It groaned, like it hated us. Cracks shot through the floor like lightning. Then a spear of crystal erupted from the concrete, slicing upward like a blade from hell. Move, someone screamed. I saw it happen. Sandoval turned to run. Too late. A black crystal spike tore through her thigh, then her torso, pinning her to the ceiling in a rain of blood and shattered light. Commander! I screamed. Maggie sprinted forward, but more crystal erupted between us. A wall of death. She's stuck. Rin shouted. No way through. The Riftlands are consuming the structure, Yusuf said. It's reacting to us. We're not leaving her, I said. The floor's unstable. Rico warned. This whole section's going to collapse. Then we do this fast, I snapped. Bishop, charges. Can you break that spike? He hesitated. Maybe, but it's risky. If I miss. Don't miss. Maggie was already pushing toward a safe spot to work. She's alive, she said, but barely. Femoral artery hit. She's got minutes. I need access to her now. Bishop barked. 10 seconds. You've got 5, I said. The rest of the squad laid down cover fire as new hostiles emerged, armored troops in sealed suits, firing from the shadows. They moved like they knew this place, like it knew them back. I set up to cover the rear. Mendez reloaded beside me, hands moving automatically. More coming, he shouted. Right flank. The M249 roared. Suppressive fire thundered across the corridor, echoing like drums through a battlefield made of madness. Behind me, Bishop planted his charge and shouted, "Fire in the hole!" The explosion shattered the crystal, and Colonel Sandoval fell straight into my arms. She hit me like a sack of bricks. Colonel Sandoval, pale and barely breathing. Blood soaked through my sleeves. Her body trembled once and then went still. "Ma'am, stay with me," I said, lowering her gently as Maggie rushed in, trauma kit already open. "She's bleeding out," Maggie muttered, voice taut. "Arteries torn. I can patch it, but she needs 5 minutes. Minimum." "You've got 3, I told her. "We'll give you that." I stood, empty saw in my hands, staring down a corridor we had no business still occupying. Crystal growths kept pushing through the walls, reshaping the building as if the land wanted it back. The walls cracked. Steel bent. We were inside something trying to crush us alive. "Cover sectors," I barked. Mendez, reload. Rico, Ren, flank suppression. Yusuf, ammo count. "Low," he called. 2 mags each. 1 belt left. Bishop handed me the final belt. Make it count. I slammed it in, racked the action. The familiar weight returned. Cold comfort. Another wave of hostiles poured through the broken corridor. Same armor, same methodical advance. These weren't rookies. They moved like they'd drilled this scenario. Overlapping arcs. Controlled aggression. Mendez fed the belt, and I went loud. 3-second bursts, sweep left. 2 seconds, adjust height. 1 second, fake them into cover, then pivot and hammer the edge. We weren't just holding the line, we were dictating it. Yusuf took a hit. Vest caught it, but he dropped. Bishop dragged him back, while Rin filled the gap. Maggie called out, "She's stable, for now. We've got a window. Maybe 2 hours." I looked to the others. We all knew that wasn't good enough. "We find a way out," I said. "No going back the way we came." Crystal sealed it. "There has to be an emergency exit," Rico said. "Every facility has them." "Then find it," I snapped. They moved, squad tight, formation shifting to protect the wounded. Mendez stayed on me, feeding belts while I cleared angles. My shoulder screamed from recoil fatigue, but I didn't let up. And then Rin spotted it. A heavy door at the far end of a collapsing hall, half buried behind debris and scorched symbols. "Evacuation marker," she said, pointing. Bishop didn't ask. He ran forward, slapped charges against the lock, and blew it open with a roar. Behind the door, a steep, jagged tunnel carved into raw earth. No lights, no rails, just a path and the promise of maybe. "Move," I shouted. Maggie and Rico carried the colonel, Yusuf limping behind. Rin and I brought up the rear, while Mendez fed the last of our ammo. At the tunnel mouth, I turned, leveled the saw, and cut loose, suppressing the last push of enemies as we retreated into the dark. Then the belt clicked dry. No more bullets. Just footsteps and adrenaline. We climbed. The tunnel was narrow, jagged, and felt like it had been carved in desperation, like someone once clawed their way out of this hell and left us a map in the form of raw stone. We climbed with everything we had. Colonel Sandoval moaned once, then went silent again. Maggie kept whispering to her, words meant to anchor her to the world. "You're not done, ma'am. Stay with me. Just hold on." The incline grew steeper. Our boots slipped on the smooth stone. Every few feet, someone had to stop and catch their breath. "I can't hear them," Mendez whispered behind me. "No more footsteps. No pursuit." "Doesn't mean they're gone," I said. "They could be sealing exits. Watching from above." Rico paused at the front. "Light up ahead." We moved faster now, hearts pounding. The tunnel spat us out onto a ledge halfway up a crystalline cliff face. And for the first time in what felt like days, we saw the sky. Not normal sky. The Riftlands sky. It shimmered like broken glass reflecting sunset through oil. But it was still sky. Still open air. And it gave us something more, signal. "I've got a ping," Nora King said, clutching her battered radio with white knuckles. "Partial comms. If I can just..." She fiddled with the dial, adjusted frequency, then transmitted. "Any station, this is Lion Team. Emergency extraction required. Critical casualties. Coordinates to follow." Nothing. Then, static cracked. "Lion Team, this is Overwatch. Confirm critical casualties." "Confirmed," Nora breathed. "Commander down, multiple wounded. No ammo. Being pursued." There was a pause. Then, extraction inbound. 2 birds en route. ETA 22 minutes. We looked at each other. 22 minutes. We had no ammo. 2 team members couldn't walk. And the enemy wasn't done yet. "Can we hold?" Overwatch asked. I looked around. Yusuf had a cracked rib and a busted ankle. Ren's shoulder was soaked in blood. Sandoval was half conscious and growing colder by the minute. Bishop was limping. Nora couldn't walk. And we were down to knives, sidearms, and resolve. "We can hold," I said, even though every instinct screamed otherwise. And so we prepared. We dug in behind the crystal outcroppings on the ledge, the jagged geometry finally working in our favor. I found a vantage point to set up my saw, even if it was dry, and position myself to look like I was still ready to fire. Decoys work best when you sell the illusion. "Watch for movement," I told Mendez, who was now armed with a sidearm and nothing else. Then, from the tunnel mouth, they came. Same sealed suits. Same silence. They moved with eerie precision, filing out in waves. They weren't scared. We were supposed to be dead already. They didn't rush. That's what unnerved me most. They came out of the tunnel with slow, deliberate steps. like they knew exactly how little we had left. Like they'd counted our bullets, and were just here to clean up. I crouched behind a twisted ridge of crystal, empty saw cradled in my hands. Mendez sat beside me, breathing hard, a single magazine tucked into his vest like it might multiply if he believed hard enough. Bishop leaned into me. 2 charges left, he said. That's all I've got. That tunnel, I said, nodding at the mouth. You think you could collapse it? Maybe, he replied. But I need to get within 30 meters. I can give you that window, I said. You'll be wide open, he whispered. That's a suicide run. I'm not asking for approval, I replied. I'm asking you to move when I fire. He nodded once. You say when? I turned to the squad. Everyone else holds position. Last stand. We buy 20 minutes, or we don't get home. Maggie was still crouched beside Colonel Sandoval, hand pressed against the makeshift compression wrap. The colonel looked like death, face pale, skin cold, but her eyes opened when I passed. You shouldn't be here, she rasped. You think I was going to leave you behind? I whispered. Her eyes softened. You're going to do something stupid. Always, I said, then stood up and leveled my weapon. Even empty, the saw still felt like a promise. I moved into the open, squared my stance, and pulled the trigger. Nothing but click. Then I reached for my sidearm, drew it, and went loud. 1, 2, 3 shots. Targets ducked instinctively. Mendez followed my lead, firing from cover. Rin took up another angle with her last 2 mags, firing sharp, controlled bursts. The enemy responded, carefully, tactically. They weren't reckless, but they hesitated just long enough. Now, Bishop, I shouted. He ran like hell. 30 meters across broken stone and crystal fragments. He dropped to his knees near the tunnel entrance, placed both charges like he'd done it 100 times, armed them, then sprinted back. Fire in the hole, he shouted as he passed me. The explosion was perfect. The cliff face shuddered. A roar echoed through the Riftlands. Crystal and rock caved in like a sinkhole sucking down a building. The tunnel collapsed, completely. The enemy's main route was buried under tons of rubble. Those still standing didn't charge. They stood, silent, assessing. Then one by one, they retreated. I dropped to my knees, chest heaving, and stared into the haze. The line held. The sky shimmered above us like fractured glass. And then, Nora's voice cut through the static. Birds incoming. I can see them. They came in like thunder. 2 Black Hawks, low and fast, blades slicing through the shimmering Riftlands air. The sound alone felt like salvation. Twin gunners leaned out of the sides, already pouring fire into the scattered enemy formations retreating down the slope. Tracer rounds streaked past overhead, red, white, and death. I didn't wait for orders. Maggie, get the colonel up. Rico and Mendez lifted her onto the makeshift litter. Maggie held the 4-bag overhead with shaking hands, never once breaking stride. Rin supported Nora, who was barely standing. Bishop and Yusuf limped behind, both pale and leaning into each other for balance. I was last, always last. I covered the team as we moved toward the landing zone, my empty saw cradled like it could still protect us. One of the Black Hawks flared to land, kicking up dust and glass shards that danced in the warped light. The side door slid open. Let's go, the crew chief shouted over the roar. Mendez hauled Sandoval aboard first. Nora was next, pulled in by one of the gunners. Bishop staggered after her, still clutching the detonator like it might come in handy again. I kept my eyes on the ridge. I could still see movement, those armored soldiers, watching from the edge of the debris. But they didn't fire. They didn't advance. They just stared, like this wasn't over, like they were just waiting for us to come back. I backed onto the bird last, the empty saw slung over my shoulder, and gave the pilot a nod. Go. The rotors howled. The ground fell away, and the Riftlands slipped beneath us, disappearing behind fractured terrain and glittering death. Colonel Sandoval lay still on the deck, Maggie kneeling beside her, eyes scanning monitors and field med gear. She's stable, she said. We're not losing her today. Everyone was silent for a while. Just the thrum of the blades and the occasional ping of ejected brass rolling on the floor. I sat back against the bulkhead, felt the weight of the saw settle across my lap, and finally, let the tension bleed out of my shoulders. Across from me, Mendez leaned forward. You did it, he said quietly. We did it, I corrected. No, he replied. We all would have left. Maybe not proud of it, but we would have. You didn't. You stayed. You held. I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet. Outside, the Riftlands shimmered like a broken mirror. The anomaly was still out there, still twisting the laws of nature. But we had made it out. All of us. Barely. The debriefs went on for weeks. Room after room filled with suits and brass, each one more interested in data than people. They wanted charts, timelines, weapon specs, and behavioral analysis. They wanted to know why the Riftlands rejected electronics, how the crystals grew, who built the facility, and what we'd seen. They asked about the ambush, the crystal that impaled Colonel Sandoval, the facility collapsing around us, the sealed suit soldiers who never spoke. They never asked about the fear. They never asked what it felt like to run dry behind a saw in terrain that hated you. I gave them what they wanted. Straight reports, clean narratives, no embellishment, just the facts. But the facts didn't cover it. The facility was real. A rogue program, international, covert, buried so deep in Black Ops files it practically didn't exist. Scientists from rival nations experimenting on the Riftlands itself, trying to weaponize whatever force was at play there. They were gone now, either evacuated or consumed by their own science. We'd been the first to enter and walk out with everyone alive. But I knew the truth. We survived because of decisions we shouldn't have had to make. We stayed behind enemy lines with no air support. We carried wounded across terrain that grew weapons under our feet. And we fought not because we were told to, but because we couldn't not. 2 months after we got back, Colonel Sandoval stood on a stage, one hand on a cane, the other holding a medal. She pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to my chest with fingers still stiff from nerve damage. The Riftlands extraction, she said quietly to the crowd. That's what they're calling it now. But don't let the title fool you. This wasn't just a mission. It was survival, earned inch by people who refused to let each other fall. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood there while the cameras flashed and my team watched from the front row. Still bruised, still limping, but there. Every single one of them. Afterward, I slipped away from the crowd and found the armory. I sat alone with my saw laid across the bench, cleaning each part with careful hands. The feed tray clicked shut with the same sound I'd heard under fire. Final. Reliable. Mendes found me there. He stood in the doorway for a while before speaking. You ever think about quitting? He asked. No, I said. Why not? Because terrain doesn't matter. Gear breaks. Comms fail. But the people next to you? They're the only constant. He nodded slowly. You think we'll be sent back? I looked at the weapon in my lap. Eventually. Will you go? I met his eyes. I lead from the front. 3 months later, they handed me new orders. Promotion to Sergeant First Class. Assignment, Advanced Leadership Program, followed by a Recon and Extraction Unit command. No desk. No soft posting. They knew what I was built for. Colonel Sandoval met me outside HQ when I stepped off the bird. Her limp was still pronounced, but her gaze was steady. You brought them home, she said without preamble. All of them. Couldn't have done it without the team, I replied. That's exactly why you're ready for this, she said. We've seen a lot of so-called leaders. You didn't follow protocol. You followed your gut, your training, your people. That's what command really means. She handed me the packet herself. Inside, new stripes, fresh deployment schedule, and an operations docket with a word I hadn't seen in a while. Classified. Another Riftlands. I asked, half joking. She didn't smile. Not the same coordinates, but something just as broken. I nodded, tucked the file under my arm. When do I leave? Briefings in 72 hours. Plenty of time to get reacquainted with my old friend, I said, glancing at the M249 saw slung across my back. Still carrying that relic? She teased. I shrugged. Never let me down. Can't say that about most things. She nodded, her voice quieter now. Make sure you train your new team the same way. They'll need more than orders. They'll need someone who stays when it gets impossible. That's the only kind of soldier I want beside me, I said. That night, I found my way back to the armory. I sat on the same bench I had after the medal ceremony and disassembled my saw one more time. Same routine, same pieces, same grounding calm. But I wasn't the same. Out there, in terrain that defied physics and sanity, I discovered something permanent, not in the weapon, or the strategy, or even the survival. It was in the choice. The moment I ran into the kill zone, fired dry to buy time, and refused to leave a teammate behind, that was what stayed with me. That moment where you stop being a soldier who follows and become one who leads. Because sometimes, what the mission needs isn't orders or precision. Sometimes, it just needs someone who won't quit. So I cleaned the last part, closed the feed tray with a solid click, and prepped for the next impossible place we'd be sent. Because that's what we do. We walk into the dark. We hold the line. We bring each other home. Every single time. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.